Welcome to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. This is a podcast for faithful women who want healing in their relationships, guidance from God, and internal peace. Each week, you'll hear mental health concepts taught through a spiritual lens from me, a licensed clinical mental health counselor, to help you start thinking in a higher and holier way. Welcome. On this episode, we will be discussing why your brain sometimes can't think celestial. So this month's theme on the podcast is Think Celestial. And I wanted to really spend some time talking about a concept that I believe is rooted in mental health strategies and concepts. I've had some really great interviews lined up for this month talking about how others are going through grief, loss, and divorce, and how they're able to think celestial through these difficult times. What they say may actually surprise you, so be sure to check out those episodes when they release. But today's episode is going to focus more on the science behind celestial thinking, and more specifically, the brain science. If you really look at the information the prophet and apostles have given about thinking celestial, it has core principles rooted in mental health and the brain. So here's a few examples before I dive into the actual brain talk about it. President Nelson said, as you think celestial, you will view trials and opposition in a new light. And Elder Rasband said, when we think celestial, we see things as they really are and really will be. Both of these quotes are talking about having a perspective shift, which in therapy, we often encourage patients to shift their mindset and reframe their negative experiences. This is really cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a modality that therapists use to help people recognize and reframe distorted thinking patterns. So a celestial perspective can be seen as a way to reframe struggles in a more hopeful light. And then there's Elder, I think you say his name, Villaire, I'm not sure. He said, if we think celestial, we will understand that in our lives, we will face challenges and that seem greater than our capacity to overcome them. And Elder Held said, we can rest assured that our difficulties, sorrows, afflictions, and pains do not define us. Rather, it's how we go about them that will help us grow. So these quotes are referring to resilience and growing through challenging times. Therapy really helps people develop resilience by recognizing that challenges, even though they're difficult, can lead to personal growth. And a modality that focuses on this is acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. You might have heard of that. It really promotes the idea that struggles do not define us, but our responses to them can affect the direction of our life. And I'm sure you're starting to see a theme here, right? Thinking celestial has a lot to do with mental health, right? But why isn't it just easy to think celestial? Have you ever felt like the more that you try to think celestial, sometimes the more negative or short-sighted that your thoughts get? Or maybe you've tried to have an eternal perspective and there's this quote unquote, yeah, but kind of tone to everything that comes to your mind about eternal thinking. Have you ever experienced something like that? Well, there's a literal scientific explanation for why that's happening in your brain. And it has to do with the part of your brain most responsible for allowing a long-term view and a widened perspective. This part of your brain is called the prefrontal cortex. This area is located in the front part of your brain, and it plays a crucial role in executive functioning. That really is like your functioning abilities. It includes planning for the future, decision-making, impulse control, or maintaining a broader perspective beyond the immediate concerns of what's happening. The prefrontal cortex of your brain is what supports long-term view or celestial thinking in a few different ways. So the first way is future planning, right? Like setting and working on a long-term goal. When you're using this part of your brain, you can literally play out a situation in the future and feel hope and joy as if you've actually achieved that goal. What would that be like to be going through something really challenging and your brain just offers you thoughts in the future that are hopeful and joyful? That's pretty amazing to be able to do that, right? Another way President Nelson talked about celestial thinking is by making decisions based on how they will affect you long term, right? This is what in the therapy world we call impulse control. The prefrontal cortex part of your brain is what regulates immediate impulses and urges and allows you to act in ways that align with celestial goals. Then there's your brain's ability to regulate emotion. What do your emotions have to do with thinking celestial? Well, when you get overwhelmed with emotion or one strong emotion, that can block your ability to see past a current situation. You can get fixated on a situation because of the emotion, and it can pull you back into this short-term or earthly thinking, we might say. But when you can turn that prefrontal cortex part of your brain back on or get those networks firing again, then you can regulate that emotion and see past the problem you're experiencing. So what is it that turns off that ability to use your prefrontal cortex? Well, there's actually a few things. One is the amygdala. This is sometimes referred to as amygdala hijacking. The amygdala can trigger an immediate fight, flight, or freeze response and really bypass rational thinking. Another thing that interferes with prefrontal cortex functioning is stress and cortisol. Chronic stress leads to elevated cortisol levels, which can keep that prefrontal cortex from functioning properly. And it starts to engage the amygdala to take the driver's seat. So the amygdala is also the part of your brain that wants like this immediate reward, which can keep the prefrontal cortex from delaying gratification for future benefits. So if this is happening for you, you might find yourself often frustrated later when you binge on food or scroll too much social media and don't accomplish some of the things that you want for your long-term goals. So a simplified way to look at this is to use the analogy of driving a car versus cruise control. So imagine your brain is like driving a car. When you're fully engaged in making decisions, problem solving, and thinking clearly, that's when you're using your prefrontal cortex, the driver of your brain. This part helps with focus, self-control, and planning, and all of these are really necessary when you're thinking celestial. However, just like a driver can't manually control every little detail all the time without getting exhausted, your brain also needs to conserve energy. So when you're tired, stressed, or not actively focusing, your brain switches to autopilot mode, which sometimes is referred to your default mode network. This can be similarly looked at as cruise control in your car. This mode relies on habits, past experiences, and emotions rather than deliberate intentional thinking. When you're fully present and engaged, prefrontal cortex mode, in using that mode in your brain, you're a driver. You're making the turns, you're adjusting your speed, and you're actively steering that car. When your brain switches to default mode, right, or that default mode network, it's like putting your car on cruise control. It runs on past patterns, habits, automatic thoughts, right? So think about what your negative patterns, habits, or automatic thoughts are when you're stressed or overwhelmed. Probably not a great representation of who you really are, right? Well, this is why when you're exhausted, stressed, or emotional, your brain may default to automatic responses, like reacting emotionally instead of logically. So what can you do if you get pushed into this cruise control mode rather than active driving of your life? Well, one strategy is mindfulness or meditation. Mindfulness helps you regulate the amygdala and it reduces your brain's natural stress responses. Another strategy is having a consistent gratitude practice. Gratitude reduces stress by focusing on spiritual blessings and eternal relationships. Scripture study is another strategy that can rewire those neural pathways. It can make it easier to adopt eternal perspectives. And acts of service activate reward pathways and help spark that long-term fulfillment rather than immediate pleasure. And visualizations of eternal goals by spending a few minutes each day imagining your eternal goals can help you get out of that autopilot mode. Now, each of these strategies need to be practiced consistently to train your brain to get out of autopilot. So coming up with a solid strategy is really key. That's one of the reasons I created a new line of products that I'm calling my Think Celestial line. I created this, first of all, this cute, dainty 18 karat gold adjustable bracelet that says Think Celestial on it. It's to help you have this daily reminder to practice some of those thinking celestial strategies so that you can receive the benefits of thinking celestial. But not only is it a reminder, this bracelet also comes with a link to more mental health resources to help you think celestial. And another product I just released is my Think Celestial mini puzzle. Puzzling is a great mindfulness activity, first of all, and this puzzle also comes with those same mental health resources. And finally, I created a small pocket-sized stress less kit with curated items that help you churn back on that prefrontal cortex part of your brain. Each of these new items are perfect Christ-centered Easter gifts, missionary gifts, Mother's Day gifts, or just a treat yourself kind of gift. So check out the link in my show notes that takes you to my store where you can check all of these resources out and help yourself think more celestial. All right, be sure to check out all the episodes that I have this month that will help you think more celestial through those challenging times in your life. All right, have a good week. Thank you for listening to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. I hope you were able to find ways of healing, guidance, and peace. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend who would love to start thinking in a higher and holier way as well. Or hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. Also, check out the links in my show notes for other episodes you might like and links for other mental health resources on my website.